Inequality is not only the resulting inequity and imbalance between the haves and haves not, but it's very much the inequality in opportunities, the lack of access, the lack of capabilities to succeed. It's more important to address the access to opportunities, the access to prosperity, flourishing, and success, as opposed to redistributing after the fact. Help someone from the beginning, not after the fact. Well, climate is obviously front and center and will be so for decades. I do think it's wishful thinking, meaning naive, that we would deal with it through better behavior, by conservation. I think the only way out, truly, is technology and developments there. It's very hard, especially in the rich world, to ask the majority of the world to conserve, not develop, not pollute, because they have needs that are quite basic and that we would prevent. Pollution, consumption on a planetary level will increase, no matter what our conservation policies might be. We need to invest much more in technology to help us mitigate pollution and especially find new ways to develop and harness the energy that exists from the sun to others. So tapping into energy is absolutely possible. That's where we should invest. Our current environment pits cultures one against another. It's really the West against non-Western thinking. The question is, what's the West? And is there a West? Broadly speaking, yes. You would think that Western Europe and the US and a few countries in Asia, as well as south of the equator, all share the same ideas and the same values. Still, are they together? How do they react to non-Western competition? They each have their own histories and self-interest. You can see, even today, that America and Europe have divergent ways of dealing with China or Russia. A unified Western front would obviously offer a stronger bloc. The likelihood of that happening is not that high unless there's a real crisis. Even with the Ukraine war, the response hasn't been very uniform. During the COVID health crisis, everyone was for themselves. Cooperation is much lower than one would have expected. Natural language models like ChatGPT are a form of intelligence. The question is, as that intelligence grows, as that intelligence acquires more reach, powers, will it develop its own agency, a sense of self, and consciousness? I guess that it's possible. When, how? Just through accumulated experience or via certain twists or by chance? I'm not sure. But there's a reasonable likelihood that agency will develop. Beyond, to what level will the agent develop a sense of self, self-awareness, consciousness in the sense of human consciousness? That's really the ultimate question. Europe was at the forefront of technological innovation and new thinking for a few centuries. It seems that the energy to innovate and think shifted to the New World, mostly America. Now China has reawakened and is also innovating. The question is, will Europe actually have the ecosystem and frankly the will to innovate again at home, to produce new ideas, including new technologies that are homegrown and that have global resonance? One of the issues, especially in the West, is that everything, because it's politicized, is treated with delays by government, including responses to crisis. Climate produced by us, humans, it's at this point a technology, an economic and political solution. The politics are divisive, the economic issues are real, and on the technology side, governments typically are behind the curve. For governments to respond in an effective way, they need to be close to the technology, be part of development or funding of these technologies. One of the issues, especially in the West, is that government is actually quite removed from technology. We've seen this in many areas, including, for example, social media. And that's also happening with climate. As everything gets politicized, government reactions tend to be slow, hesitant, and in some cases ideological to the point where it's hard to update them or reverse them. We've got to be practical. And it's important that government, in this case, because it's a planetary issue, it's massive, that government would be willing to invest substantial resources, meaning talent, effort, focus, and money, to coming up with ideas, solutions, and new technology, because technology will probably be the only way to truly address and hopefully solve the climate crisis that is in front of us. Cultures, in the form of knowledge, in the form of creating and living in communities, in the form of art, and the transmission of it is what has made us humans. In essence, it's our second strand of DNA. Harmony and freedom, in essence, fight each other, but they need each other. If you have too much freedom, you don't have harmony. If you have too much harmony, you don't have freedom. You need one interlocked in some ways with the other. You need harmony in general to exist and to prosper. You need freedom to have agency, to develop. The tension between harmony and freedom will always exist, but they're a little bit like partners. They actually need each other.
AIs are becoming more powerful, more sophisticated. As opposed to looking at AIs as a tool, they're becoming more and more the equivalent of another species, of another agent, just like we are one and others exist. AIs are a form of intelligence, and depending where they are able to go, they'll be an ally in certain things and may really become its own thing after a while. if that's the case, it'll be exciting. The question is, who is that AI? A little bit like, who is this new species? We've always talked about extraterrestrials and always wondered, who are they? Who could they be? Well, they'll be with us, right at home, in the form of AIs. That's what makes it interesting and challenging. We shouldn't look at them as an inert machine. They'll be a living thing. The question is, what kind of living thing? Humans are biological. We are bodies. We are analog. It takes us time to grow, to learn, to change, to adapt. What's interesting is that our minds can wander, can create, construct, imagine. So we are a little bit like a two-headed monster in one. Analog and digital. At times, we jump. There are leaps in thinking. There are inventions. There's new science, new beliefs, new systems. Yet, it takes a long time for us to accept them, to believe them, to live with them. Look at religions, political systems, philosophies, but culture, music, art. It takes a while for people to accept the new and live with the new, but it always happens. Competing narratives, competing opinions are helpful in developing the new. At the same time, they can become toxic. America today is a country that celebrates diversity in every way, which is quite wonderful, exciting, but it has gotten to a point where it divides as opposed to brings together. We have to learn to come together. Doesn't mean that we need to become conformist or one. We won't ever be. But we can't just be fighting against ourselves forever. There are different ways of living life. One is to just live and not care. That may be not only the easiest, but the healthiest way to live. Is it possible for us humans? Is it exciting? Once you take a more proactive approach, a more ambitious approach, you'll wonder, are you living your life? Is it really yours? Is it what you think could be your life? When you become aware of this, you can make choices. Those choices will determine if that life is really yours. If what you are able to do, what you're able to explore, what you're able to experience is actually being experienced. That's what's exciting for some, and maybe not for others. The chance to live your life, and yours, very much yours, is a question, an opportunity, and a challenge. Having a sense of what's right and wrong is key. It's key to the health of every one of us, our mental health, and our experience in life, in the real world. Yet, if you travel the world, you realize that values are relative. And you also realize that you learn that what you thought were maybe the most important or the most moral values really weren't the ones that mattered to you or made sense. That's why to have a good life, you need morals, but you also need a life to create those morals, because your morals are not something you inherit, it's actually something that you develop. You could argue, rightly, that everything is political. The question is, for a healthy and functioning democracy, are there certain things that citizens should provide to one another, that governments should provide, that are really services that are for the good of most people, as opposed to politicized an argument around everything? At some point, if everything is a fight, you lose joy and inability to progress. Democracies are there to serve citizens, most citizens. Governments are there to serve society. We have to make sure in our democracies that we maintain that objective, that North Star, bringing people together, having a service mentality is key, as opposed to just having an ideological position. No matter when, humans always had questions, fundamental questions of where we came from, who are we, where are we going. That hasn't changed. In today's world, we just have more options. The options are given to us by the world we live in, the digital offerings that are non-stop, different cultures. That's exciting. Choice is always exciting. But at some point, do you get lost? Do you get confused? Is there just too much? Maybe there isn't too much, but it's hard to edit. Editing is our challenge, not just for each one of us as an individual, but for society in general, so that we have a healthy way forward. Well, we come from love, and at the end, what we crave most are relationships, which are the expressions of love. That's how we survive as a species. That's what makes us the happiest, or at times the opposite. It's the most fundamental. You look at a baby, you look at your grandparents, it's all about love. You don't need many words, explanations. It's profound but simple. In between, there's life, a human life. And that's the life that we have created as civilizations. Those are filled with words, with actions, with habits, with behavior that is at time related to love or anything but love. but it is our lives. Yet, we know it from the very start and at the end. What is the most meaningful and the most precious is love.